2HP makes all their modules that width. So they're
Okay.
throwing down. They've based their whole company. See, it says 2HP on the bottom.
Yeah, yeah.
They've basically cornered themselves and said, you know what? We're only going to make things that big. And I love them because that challenge is to see what they can do in a tiny space. So, for instance, this is a sequencer. It's a 16 note sequencer, and so it spits out notes, and I've used that before. And then they also have a kick drum that's over there.
Yeah. Man, that's pretty
The
cool.
lights, huh?
I said that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the light's a little intense there because I'm right near a light bulb, but you see it. It's the second one
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
right. It
Yep.
says kick drum. I'm going to start with that one to demonstrate. Yeah, I love their stuff because in a crowded system, you can squeeze in a couple of useful things that are really tiny. So I have a few of their things. I have kick, snare, and hat. So let's see. Let's just take this, and I'm just gonna patch that for a second. Kick drum, and then you got to have some kind of a pulse going to the kick drum. So where's that coming from? I don't even know what the hell. Sometimes I'm like, where's that going? Let's see. This is red. Where the hell is this plugged into? Jeez. What the? Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, it's coming from there. Okay. That's the thing. It's a lot of tracing. Okay. So the kick drum now has a pulse going into it. And what's cool is you can see the little green light,
Yep.
and
I see it.
it's blinking at the speed. I just turned the speed down, so the light, it's now you can see it pulsing
Okay.
very
Yeah, yeah.
slowly. And as I'm turning up the speed, it goes a little faster. So, all right, so let's listen to that kick drum. Get rid of the reverb. And what's cool is, that's a pretty good, pretty typical kick drum. But what you can do is change the pitch. So that's the pitch. You can the pitch can go into range that you wouldn't even think of as a kick drum. I mean, look at it; it's only at 12 o'clock,
Yeah.
and now it already sounds like a tom, like a Simmons tom, actually, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
I can keep going. So that's a pretty high range, man, to be called a kick drum. But there it is. But then you can adjust also the resonance, so it can become a tiny little click. To me, this is kind of a combination of resonance and decay, because like here it's just very clicky like a hi-hat, but if I
Mm-hmm.
turn that up, it sustains, right? So they call that knob tone, but I mean it's more than tone. It's giving you more sustain. And then there's one more knob called trig, and I can't really figure out how to define that, but it's kind of like a polarity thing, because all the way up, all the way down, you get almost that hi-hat sound. See?
Yep.
But in the middle, it's kind of just a ticking. So very flexible module. I love their modules. They're also really inexpensive. They're like 99 bucks. But I love that something called a kick drum, I could get that much range out of it. But if I turn it back now to kick drum range, wow, that's cool. That's like a cowbell, or almost like you know, right in that range of human. A little reverb on that. Yeah, pretty cool. So, okay, taking it back to kick drum level. And with the release, that's what we're often trying to tame as a sound guy, right? When the kick drum's too resonant.
Yep.
Like, get these drummers that just don't get it. Like, dude, I can't give you more in the monitor because it's feeding back. And this is what it sounds like out front. Drummers and the loud monitors. Okay. So that's pretty cool. Kick drum.
Now, can I just ask real quick what you
Please.
used to? What did you use to trigger that? Was that just like a gate or a LFO or?
Yeah, that's a great question. And no, man, any questions? That's the whole. Yeah, I love it. So I have a number of places that are clock sources, and
Oh, a
that's
clock. Okay.
yeah. So I have a clock. I could be sending this a clock from well, it's good I have the mobile camera now. On the bottom shelf is this. I've got this unit here, and that sends out clocks. You see it just pulsing in time.
Yeah, yeah.
So that does have a clock out that I sometimes use. This thing, that's an old Korg K oscillator. Remember the Korg Chaos pad?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
I
that's
do.
I love this whole era of stuff. It's so great because although we are going back to this DAWless thing where people are going, wait a minute, hardware is cool. We went into this crazy period where everything was software and all these things started popping up used for peanuts, 75 bucks. These things that would be 350, 400 when they came out. So I scoop that shit up whenever I can. And it's incredible. I mean, it sounds great.
Yeah.
That's what I was playing before when I was demoing Synth. This little thing has all these. Sounds great. So the Chaos Pad's a useful little thing to just add another texture. But answering your question, I get my clocks out of that sometimes. So I get clocks from different things. I actually have one of those 2 HP units that's just a clock. It's not here right now, but I'm getting this from this thing called a woggle bug. This strange looking alien piece. And you could see you see that light there blinks at the speed of the clock. So as I turn it up, see?
Okay.
Now it's
Yeah, yeah.
blinking. That's going to
Yep.
blink faster. So this is my clock output. This unit. This unit does a couple strange things. It's very influenced by Buchla, as I've said before about this company. Make Noise. So that's the clock I'm using. So I'm taking the clock out of there and I'm putting it into this thing that's this whole strip is called a mult. And what a mult does is just what it does in the sound world. Lets you input one time and multiply it.
Okay, so you can send that same clock signal to other
Exactly.
drum modules, so they're all on the same clock.
Exactly.
Okay.
So this is a really clever and unique invention. No one else, I think, in the biz has it like this. This is when I bought this case. You get the empty case with this middle row in it, and
Wow.
if you look, it's labeled 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep.
And those are these staggered lines, and it's brilliant because 1, 2, 3, 4 is where you would input your source, right?
Right.
And each of those 4 sources, if you follow the lines logically, you could see they all repeat. And they're color coded.
Okay.
See how it's working? So
Yep.
so the first one, which happens to be a green. Now keep your eye on those other green lights blinking. When I unplug this, they'll go away. See? because I killed the signal. I got rid of it. If I put it back, watch how all the green lights come back, right?
Okay.
So it's a really great and logical system when you're performing, because if you know you just plugged in green here, that could be a clock, it could be a CV, it could be audio, it could be anything, right? But in that performance mode where you can't really, you know, focus on much more than the performance, it's really a brilliant design, because I plug something in green, then I automatically know I have a copy of it everywhere I see green, right?
Excellent. That's a great idea.
Awesome. Awesome. So you could see that last white cable is plugged in to a green, right?
Right.
So I'm getting, I'll unplug it, you'll see it'll go away. See? But when it's going, that means that that white cable is now getting a copy of the clock,
Okay.
which I have going to another unit here, div, which divides the clock.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, I remember you went over that one time before. It like you
Yeah,
could take it a third of the time. You know, it breaks it up.
exactly. So there you have it's labeled clock because that it's looking for a clock input there. And then there it is, right? You can see the divide by two, divide by three, four, five, you know. And so coming out of those, I can now do really really diverse drum beats, because I take that one drum beat and split it up. So that, yeah, that's a good question there.
Wow, that's cool. Because I've always wondered. This is really fascinating because I always love the way the modular drum sound that you came up with. It sounds really, I really love it. And now I'm kind of getting a glimpse of how you
Right.
achieve some of that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm fascinated by that. Exactly. I'm really like and thank you for hearing that, because I really spend a lot of time trying to see what rhythms work against other rhythms, and so
And because you
clock the
use it, and because you're using the one clock, and you go to the div, it's still the one clock, but it's like if you send another like a divide by two to another machine, it's still kind of in that clock range. It's
that's
just
right.
it's just doing
That's
something double of what the other thing is doing, but it's still keeping the same, I guess beats per minute for a lack of better um
no, that would be the
foundation.
term. No,
Yeah.
you're exactly correct. And that's very intuitive, and you're correct. The beauty of it is you you are still going to be, yeah, divide by five, divide by seven, divide by four. They're still all obeying that one major heartbeat. Exactly. And I'll demonstrate in a minute how powerful that is, because now you have this one knob that controls the whole system, whether you want to take things up or down speed wise, and they'll all change in whatever ratio you've given them, but they change it in a ratio. Yeah. So so I love clock dividers. I love any kind of thing that'll let you split the time up. So the last one I have in this system, and then I'll plug some other drums in. Right next to the Pico drum, there's this one here, the Depfer. It's called A162 clock divider. It's called.
Okay.
And now, first off, Depfer is an important company to talk about for a second. And I talked about this in that synth interview I did the other night. Really important company. I forget the guy's first name. It's a German guy, Depfer, and he's really important. He's still alive, because in the 90s he said, "Wait a minute, you have these Moog format things, these old Moog modules, and but they're big, they're expensive, and they're kind of locked into a certain methodology. What if I shrunk this down to a smaller?" So he's the one who came up with the rack height. Like the height of these units is all the same. The width is different, right?
Right.
Metal, but the height is a standard, just like rack mount is always 19 across, right?
Right.
Um, uh, and all this shit is based actually on the 19 across rack format. A lot of these systems are exactly 19 inches across. So that I'm fascinated by that too, because as you know, that's a format that goes back to like World War II, right?
Oh yeah.
Those
Yeah.
racks in radar systems and radio systems, they were rack mounting them,
Hmm.
and using XLR. So It's amazing how ancient some of this stuff is. Anyway, this guy Depfer said, "Why don't we shrink this stuff down?" And he really came up with these ideas. I don't. This is the only Depfer thing I own. I'm pretty sure, yeah. But I love it because you can see what it's doing. It's got a little dips, not dips, but a little toggle here. 1, 2, 3 positions, right? And
Mm-hmm.
depending on the position, that's what you get. Either it's a little confusing to look at first, but it makes total sense. In each position of that toggle, you get either the first number, the second, or the third. That's all.
Oh, okay.
So in position 1, if we look down, you're going to get 2 divisions of 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. See?
Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense. That's just factors of 2. The middle is where I hang out a lot because then you get 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17. So you literally get your 4/4 pulse, doom, 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 where it chops each of those into 13ths. What the fuck is that?
Yeah, I know, right?
But it's odd time. And that's where, African music, Indian music, a lot of music from around the world, Indonesian, when we analyze it, that's what they're playing. That's why all that music, quote unquote, sounds exotic to us, right? Because it's going, that kind of thing, right? We hear that and we go, exotic Indian music. And that's what they're doing. They're playing crazy times where they're counting to 33 and 17. And so once you understand that, it's like, oh, okay, this kind of a box lets you do some fucked up rhythms, which I'll do in a second. And then of course the third position gives you, what does it give you there? 2, 3, 4, 5, straight up the line, 6, 7, 8. So integers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's integers, prime numbers, and just divided by 2. So I love this. And again, you put one clock into it and it's going to spit out 8 different clocks. So love it. All right, so I'm going to patch this. So again, I say to myself, okay, I've got the general overall clock speed coming from here. It's coming in, and this whole line, anywhere I tap into a green, I'm going to get the clock, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's pull that green right there, and I'm going to put it into the clock divider. Notice it starts blinking. It's funny. Blinking is funny on video because it's all about refresh rate.
Yeah.
but I think you can see that.
Yeah, I do.
Now it's blinking. And again, if I slow the speed down, you hardly see any blinking because it's not, I'll turn it up. Now you can see, there you go. It's going to get pretty interesting. So, okay, well, let's hear what that sounds like. Let's do the same thing. This is a live cable. I'm going to put it into the output. Nothing's happening because I haven't triggered those drums yet. Right?
Okay, yep.
So let's go ahead and do that. Let's start simple. That was loud. And you're hearing kick drum, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, let's keep it simple. So I've just got a little drum beat going. The cool thing with this is I can now go in and change the pitch. So again, like the other one, I can get quite a bit of range. And again, Simmons, right? That's like a Simmons tom all the way.
Yeah.
And I could turn it back down. Speed that up a little bit. So it's somewhere around there. What I love also is the simplicity that um, you could just take something like what I have there, a kick drum sound, and as you know, you play around with something like reverb. I'm going to put it into my reverb unit instead, and suddenly you have this world of. So there's the same sound, but in a massive reverb.
Hmm.
And once you start playing around with that, so there's my dry wet. It's all the way dry now, and I've got a really small reverb room here. I'll bring it. I'll bring the mix wet slowly. Wow.
That's a nice sound.
Say again.
I said that's a nice sound.
That's a nice sound, and what's great is you need no explaining there, uh, and it's something you already know. But I'm going to encourage you, like as you build your sounds, as you work your sounds, don't forget to pause and fuck around with like your lexicon and your with the simplest sounds, the simplest sounds.
Oh, I
You've
did.
got so much.
I put a reverb on my radar tones.
There you go.
It's just a simple beep, but I wanted a little just something extra, and I was fiddling around with a reverb, and I came up with a reverb sound. Yeah, I do a lot of that.
And it totally transformed it, right?
Yeah, it just makes it just that much,
Yeah.
because if I always remembered watching, and this is weird, watching these 50s and 60s movies, war movies with the radar ping, you always get a little
Yes.
extra tail off the ping,
Right.
like with the visual, because even the visual, when you used to see the little blip on the screen, it would have a little tail off of it after it swiped over,
Yeah.
and you would hear just a little trail, and that's what I did for the for
And
them.
they even emphasize it on the movies. They make it
Yeah.
more than it would be, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I put that on my regular Instagram story. If you get a chance while you're taking out the trash or something, you can.
Yes.
I came right in and I said, "Oh, I want to listen to that," and But anyway, that's.
Awesome. No, I do love that. I just haven't been on Instagram in about 48 hours, but I always see you're on my feed there, so I love that. By the way, I haven't even said cheers. Today we have um, I kept it simple, just a little tequila here.
Oh, nice.
So keeping
I
it
just
simple.
have some H2O because I'm at the studio. But
Ah, right.
cheers.
And you're driving, yeah. Well, I'll have a shot for you.
I appreciate that.
I'm out
Thanks
of
for
beer
having my
though, so I'm
back.
having it with a yerba mate, which is pretty good. Um, yeah. So again, preaching to the converted. I'm not. You're a sound man. I don't have to tell you the
But
importance of effect.
what I do find interesting is a lot of these. I'm used to like the rack mount, audio reverbs, but a lot of these modular reverbs really do some interesting things, and they sound really nice compared to some of the stuff I'm used to. So
Right.
I appreciate listening to these.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, this one, this guy fascinates me. I talked to you a little bit about him. His name's Tom Erb,
Oh,
and
it's the
he's
herb
a
verb. Okay, yeah.
yeah, he's a sound designer. He's a computer programmer. So he just and what he did, it's great. I'm reading a great interview with him. If it's in an actual print magazine, but if it's online, I'll send it to you. But it's fascinating because he said I actually didn't know a ton about reverbs. He said I knew a little bit, but they went out and he bought like a bunch of reverbs, I think including the lexicon, and he just checked out all these reverbs and said, well, what do they all do? And he just thought of some interesting things to go in there. But again, just you know to say something that's obvious to you, that sometimes we just get too complicated. I think that's kind of where I wouldn't say, you know, when I play on these festivals, when I play, because I've gigged a lot in this world, and I'm not like blowing smoke, but most of the time someone comes over and says, "Wow, you had a different approach,"
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't make my better or worse. Usually I'm going, dude, your set kicked my ass. But when people say that, I realize my approach is often keep it simple. Even though I have all this stuff, I mean, you've seen enough videos. There's guys with 18 times this on their wall. Like you
Yeah,
look and it's just,
exactly.
so
They don't use sheetrock; they use modular
it's
module.
crazy. So, so it's all relative because someone walking down the street would look at this and go, oh my God, you have all this stuff. But
Right.
in that world, this is a surprisingly simple system. There's no filter here. There's only one VCA. It's funny when you're at these things and everyone goes around looking at each other's gear. I always get that from people. They're like, where's your filter? I'm like, well, sometimes I just don't have one. I just don't. How come you don't have any VCAs? Well, I have just this one, but I approach it in a weird way. I don't know why. Maybe from a guitar point of view, from an effects pedal point of view. But one thing I do a lot in my sets when I play is I'll just do the whole thing based around something stupidly simple, like what I just did, which is just kick drum into reverb. So you get. I love that 1950s thing too, because as you know, some of those old movies, it's Twilight Zone, even this is all they're doing. Spaceship landing.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, I've done sets where I've done a whole 10-minute piece just kind of based around that,
Wow.
because there's so much there.
Yeah, I really do dig that kind of thing with the drums and what you do with the reverb, and like I said, it's really cool to see the the building blocks of that.
It's No, it's great, and I just love and respect what these people did in the 50s. Like I said, all they had was a couple test oscillators, The cool thing is, and you get this, they had shit that we would pay $5,000 a piece for now,
Right.
right? These
Exactly.
tube compressors,
Yep.
these insanely powerful EQ units, right?
Mm-hmm.
That were just getting thrown away from the radio world, from the military,
Yep.
and it's wow, what a period, because the people doing this electronic music were, I hear stories. I hear from Don Preston. He would just go to these Army Navy surplus. Shit was $5. It was garbage. Oscilloscopes, oscillators, test equipment. It just got dumped.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
but the reverb units. But before I move back to just the drums, again, just because you get this. So this unit, he lets you reverse the reverb, and you could
Mm-hmm.
hit it with a pulse, so it's reverse or not reverse on a beat. See, or you could just click it like I am. Here's
Uh,
the room size,
mm-hmm.
so it goes from, as you just heard, almost slap back to massive. Um, and then you can control the room size with a CV.
Ah.
So I'll demonstrate that real quick. And this is really where the power of modular comes in. Let's go back to that. Let's turn the decay way down. So we're just hearing, wow, again, what a great sound. That's just, that's mostly ring modulating from the reverb. Let me go all the way dry and hear the difference in this sound. It's just a snare.
Yeah. Yep.
Wild, right? But with really short, tight reverb, suddenly you get this. Sounds like a metallic, you know. So, and if I change this manually, you get. All the way to infinite, which is deep space. So, and like any reverb, I've got decay. So let's start at 0. Tight, but still a cool sound, right? If that was on a little faster. Holy shit, that could be, some fucked up, alien
Yeah.
thing. But so with the decay on 0, it's really tight. It gets out of there right away. Let me turn the decay up. Wow. So where it's about to go, like any sound man, that, or any audio person, that as I turn that decay up, it's going to go into runaway at some point, right?
Yeah.
Which was, again, man, they used the hell out of that in the Twilight Zone and all those, right?
Exactly.
It's a classic sound. So watch what happens when I go to runaway, because this guy put this other knob in here called absorb, and what it does is rolls off the highs of the runaway reverb. So it's the first reverb, and I love the runaway sound, and I have other reverb units, and I've always been a fan of that. But this is the first unit I've had that lets you take that back away. So it's not just running away with high frequency. Okay? So I'll first have it do the classic kind of runaway, and then you'll hear me roll it off. Here we go. All the way from short decay to runaway. All great usable sounds all the way. put that absorb on, suddenly you get all the motion of the sound without the runaway. It's so cool. And I could back it off a little bit. And the more I back it off, the more you get the, the runaway thing.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's great.
Isn't it? And
Yeah.
then, like, the whole key to all modular is that's me turning the knob, but I can plug in and have an LFO turn the knob. Let's see what that does. I'm just going to go to a simple square wave, start really slow, and bring it back up. So suddenly you have a variety of sound, because I've got this little LFO right there with the red plugged in. You can see it, it's blinking. But yeah, this is a real simple module. All it does is LFO. And I've got it, here's the speed, and it's either a triangle or a square. But now you really can get some textural difference because the LFO is changing this knob for me.
Yep.
I could also have the LFO change the decay for me. So you can literally hear it go away and come back. I'm just changing drum sound. It's like Godzilla walking.
I was going to say, now I can picture the giant kaiju walking,
That's great. Yeah. Oh no, Gojira! So, okay. So that's just a little detour into how awesome. I love reverb. It's always one of my favorite things.
Oh yeah.
I was doing a thing in my guitar hang the other day just about how reverb, the different types, plate reverb, spring reverb, the varying types of halls and things, and just all these, all that whole eventide world of all those pitched reverbs and shimmering reverbs, but also just how subtle you can get new sounds out of reverb. I'm amazed how people, I think in general, reverb's one of the least experiment. You know what I mean? People just, they put one on, they pick one, and they go.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I love fiddling with it, and Christ, I fiddled with the reverb one time. My Lexicon, the MPX 500, is just, there's so many things you can do with it, and you tweak it, and all the things you can get out of that. Between a good reverb and a nice digital delay, you got, probably 60% of
The world's your oyster.
yeah.
And yeah, I forget the saying. Someone says it has a great saying about, like, just really learning those basics. What is compression? What is distortion? What is reverb? What's delay and echo? But so this thing, the gift that keeps on giving, and everything's controllable by CV. You saw me manually change the size. I could control that. And you said earlier you were doing something, and you on the Korg you were adjusting the amount of the LFO, right?
Yeah, I was adjusting the amount of pitch change, that it was changing the pitch, from like
Yeah.
really low to really high. And
Mhm.
there's a intensity knob that it lets you, the more you turn it, the greater the wider the swing of pitch you're going to get, or cut
Exactly,
off
right.
or whatever.
So you could just have a tiny bit of that vibrato or a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's a super important thing. And a lot of people get confused by that. I've seen, people just not understanding that there's two things going on there. There's the LFO and the speed of it, but there's also how much are you applying
Yeah.
to your, and that's a real interesting. Once people get that, they get it. But if you look here, each of these, one, two, three, four, are little attenuation knobs, plus and minus. And that's exactly what they do. Notice they're each connected to a CV in, right?
Right.
So if I have this dead center, it no matter what CV, it won't really have an effect.
Okay.
So this is so highly controllable. So I can have a CV that's blasting into here, an LFO, anything, not going to do anything because I'm dead center. But I can have positive polarity or negative polarity. So that's quite powerful because you're
Okay.
actually, you're controlling the polarity and how much. Like that would be full on and that would be zero. So that's another,
Yeah, that
very
makes
cool thing.
sense, because the Korg has a as an envelope generator section on it,
Hmm.
and you can control again the pitch. Like when you play a key, it'll vary the pitch
Right,
depending on how the envelope generator is set, and they're it's got also has a knob similar. It's called intensity, but you swing it one way or the other, it'll either start the pitch really high and then go low, or if it's the other way, it'll start low and go high,
right.
like plus or minus. So that, I guess, that's kind of the same concept then.
Yeah,
Is that how much you're
that's
applying
that's
and which
exactly
way
right.
you're applying it? Yeah.
Yeah, it flips whatever's coming in. Okay, cool. So back to just the straight up drum sound. I had patched into the reverb, but let's just patch right out of the drum. So just a weird squashy. What is that? Jeez, it's like a snare or a tom. I love the sounds in this thing, and I'll page through a couple of them. Kick drum, three different kick drums. That's a little bit of a hi hat and a. So I'm just turning this
Hmm.
knob, and you can see I don't have them memorized, but the LEDs indicate what number you're on. It keeps changing, but means nothing to me other than like I have a couple favorites. Like I know, oh, that one there is good,
Yeah, yeah.
but I keep trying to figure out like how the hell do the numbers work? Are you familiar with like ASCII or hexadecimal?
I am, yes. Not,
There
I
you
mean,
go.
not. I know what it is. I couldn't
Hmm.
like write a poem in ASCII, but
Right. So but like hexadecimal is wacky. Like the, within 2 digits, you can express most numbers, right? I think from
right.
0 to 100 or something. And there's an
Hmm.
H in there. And, I think
Yeah.
there's a couple letters, A through H. And but it's great. It's how computers work. They had to figure out how to express math in a 2-bit situation.
Yep.
It's quite beautiful actually, because someone thought of it and said, well, there's only 10 digits, 0 to 9. There's nine non-zero integers. How do we express higher than that? And then they use letters. So it's quite brilliant. So those early computers. So this is kind of like that, where there's a chart you can get, but expressed in LEDs, you have these numbers. But anyway, I'll page through a few more. I'll speed up the click. That's the last one. Okay. At the end, there's some actual synth notes. A church organ. Okay, let's go back to a kick drum and leave it there. So, wow, you could see, God, there wasn't a drum sound that's not in there, right?
Yeah.
So, we're hearing one. I'm gonna now double it And remember, this little module has 2 sounds in it. I'm only, I've left that trigger out. So I'm going to pop another trigger in there. And I'm going to choose, let's go with odd time 5. So you'll hear it play right away. Wow. Suddenly, with just 2 drums, I've got an interesting groove. I'll leave the kick drum and then I'll move the other sound around a little bit. So you just got a beat going. And now remember, on the pulse this thing is sending out, I can vary it by just flipping this switch. So listen to that beat and I'll switch it. Totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Switch it again. Switch it again. So I love this clock divider because, wow, it just in live performance, you can really just keep varying the sounds. And as you said, this is like the sausage making. Like, you just hear me doing these beats and they're all over the place. All I'm doing is choosing different beats, different divisions with either this unit or the one that's, got the fixed choices.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing that. And this one really, this is really a remarkable and brilliant design because it's got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is it 8 or that's 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's odd right there to have an odd number. But this has 7 times 3 has 21 different beats. Some of them overlap because the 2 happens a couple times, right?
Right.
The first slot's always a 2. It starts getting different after that. 4-3-3 or 5-3. What's that say? 8-5-4. See, but you have it's not quite 21 different things because there's some repeating. But
Yeah.
you have a rich amount of beats that you simply get by switching around. So that's, to me, the fun part, that you can keep it breathing, keep it moving. So real time, I'm going to add the other drum unit so we can hear how cool the beat can get. So here we go. So I just patch that into channel 2. So the red and the black are drums now.
Okay.
And by the way, this mixer is so brilliant. It's from Pittsburgh, the company that I visited, and just in a small space, you'll love the facility here. So it's 6 channels, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's a stereo effects return. Those 2 green plugs, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Those are my stereo return. You can't really read it, but you could see under there. Anyway, it says return left and right. And the pink one is the aux send.
Ah.
It's a very unique mixer. But also, if you look right next to it, it says channel 1 out.
Mm-hmm.
Very strange. So just for channel 1, you can pull channel 1 out and do something else with it,
Wow.
which is useful. Send it somewhere else. Send
Yeah,
it to another
exactly.
unit. So anyway, you've got your classic mono send stereo return. And I've got those 3, the pink and the 2 greens, are going into this unit, my little effects unit right here. It's called DSP, see?
Mm-hmm.
And I use it for reverb, but it's it's very simple. And it's got parameter 1, parameter 2, um, you know, um, delay time, delay feedback. Depends on the patch. Very simple unit. All that's in it is about 4 little delays, 2 reverbs, a bit crusher, like a Leslie kind of a chorusy thing. But so this is my effects unit, and then you've got a dry wet percentage, right?
Mm-hmm.
But back to the mixer. So I've got that plugged in the mixer. The top knob is the aux send, so I can put that effect on any or all of the channels. This is what's really cool. There's this drive toggle. See that?
Yeah.
And so you can put it's like a 6 or 8 dB boost, a clean boost to the signal, which is great. You can really get drums and things really punchy. So that's very unique to have in a mixer, a fucking, a boost.
Yeah.
And then it's got panning on the first three channels. So that's important to note. It's got channel 1, 2, 3, and then here's channel 4, 5, 6. So, and I love that they compromised to make it this small, and they kind of give you a choice. They say, okay, channels 1, 2, 3, we give you panning, we give you individual boost or drive, and then we give you some toggle switches where you can send to the mix or to the bus, because there's also a bus. There's a bus out somewhere hidden under there. So that's
Okay.
really powerful,
Yeah.
because I can send, whatever I want to another destination. So they really crammed a lot into to a mixer. And then channel 4, 5, 6, you can see they're all bunched together.
Hmm.
You can flip them in and out of the mix or in and out of the bus, but all three at the same time.
Right. Right.
So you have a tiny compromise, but it's so
Yeah.
worth it for the space. And then you could send all of them to the aux. And then I think this is a bonus too. You've got headphones with its own volume, and the headphones can get the mix or the bus, which of course your brain already said, oh, so you could take the headphones out and have a totally separate stereo mix. That
Yep.
could be so very powerful mixer. I still haven't. I've done so many weird things with it, but I still, I think what a great design, right?
It is a nice design. Yeah.
I mean, in limited space, that you can just reroute and do different things. So okay, so I've got both drums going to the mixer. Um, let's turn it up again. So right now though, this one's getting triggered, the other one's not. So let's put some more triggers in. Let's bring it up in the mix. Pan them too. That's always fun. Now you got one on this is on the left side. That's on the right side. Okay, so we have three drums happening. Two over here and only one here because I'm only triggering one. So let's trigger the other one. That snare is annoying me. Well, here's what's cool. That snare is kind of annoying, right? So I can go in and dial it back. Okay, see, I cut the gate on the snare a little bit, or not the gate, but the release, the sustain of it.
Yep. Yep.
I'll turn it back up for so a little annoying. Let's take the release off that, and I can turn it down a little bit in the mix. Wow, that's really to me where the power of these units come in, because you're not stuck with how loud the drums are.
Yeah. That's a good feature to have.
Dude. So now that snare, it's cool. It's doing its job as a snare, but before it was like this. So now we have a cool little groove there. And if I speed that up a little, it even gets, I think that kick drum's a bit much too. So now the kick drum, I'll plug it back in. I unplugged it. Listen to how annoying it is. And that's because I have it happening the most often you could at the splitting the clock by 2. Let me move it down to a more. Now we got a pretty cool groove going. Yeah, that's my shit right there. Just odd time. Then I can mess with this divider and listen to how the subtle change of the groove happens. And once again. So that's great. But that's the kind of stuff I'm doing live. I'm just doing that. And as I'm moving around, it's changing whatever part I want to change. But since it's all listening to the same clock, it's always going to sound great. It's always going to sound rhythmic,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah. That's a good. Wow. That's a great concept and great just information. That's really wild.
That's awesome. Well, and again, it applies to you because you've got clocks in the Korg, in the Crave, and in your main stage. I mean, there's a way to, create a rhythm in any direction you want. So keep that in mind as you experiment. Say, okay, who's in charge today? Because I think on the back of your Korg, doesn't it? It says sync in and sync out.
Yes, it does.
Okay. So have you plugged that into your Crave clock input at all?
I don't know if my Crave has a clock input.
Let's take a look. See if it says something called. It might call it clock or sync or tempo.
Now that I know a little bit more about this, I might have to investigate that more.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with the Crave at all, but maybe they only let you do tempo through MIDI, which is possible. Of
Yeah.
your
Yeah, no, I saw a
tempo.
tempo. It's, yeah, it's for the sequencer tempo.
Okay, I think that would be that's it though, because right, the only thing you're really going to change is tempo. I wonder though, it might if it well, you would know because you've tried it out. Have you used your sequencer and plugged into the tempo jack?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, you probably have no reason to. Yeah,
Yeah, I
but
haven't.
yeah, but experiment with that. There's two cool things you can do. Um, are the ones on the right are the outputs, the white uh, the
Yeah.
white ink.
Yep.
That's out. Okay. So here's a fun experiment. Start a sequence
Mm-hmm.
and plug into the tempo from your Korg um, sync out.
Ah,
And start a sequence on the Korg also. So there's a clock going,
right, right.
and then and you see your tempo knob on your Korg. It should be
Yep,
yeah. You've used that a few times.
I have.
Fool around with that and see how you can control the speed of the Crave sequencer from the Korg sequencer.
Ah,
And what's awesome about that is if you just play around with the melodies, now you've got these two machines working together at the same time, right?
I will definitely try that.
The other thing I would try is let's see, what would you can do some stuff like take the LFO triangle out of your Crave
Mm-hmm.
and put it back into the tempo.
That I have done.
Okay, great. So you've
That I have done that. Yeah, and it
great.
basically, you know, speeds up and slows the tempo of the
Right.
sequencer.
That
You
makes
know,
sense. Right. So
yeah.
weird shit will happen. But always just plug everything in. Plug the noise into the tempo because, again, it's going to do something. It won't be maybe a very usable thing, quote unquote, but everything's usable, as you know.
Yeah.
Um, so mess around with that. But yeah, but that's how those two things can talk to each other, or any two things really. You find where there's a clock and you can have them talk to each other. The main stage clock would require you to have some sort of MIDI to CV thing, or just MIDI right into your Korg, and your Korg will obey the clock of the main stage.
Yeah, I've used the Korg to control the main stage uh already, you know, very basic stuff. But
That's great.
yeah,
And
and as well as the Crave.
you connect to main stage just USB, right? Does that Korg have a USB jack?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, the Korg and the Crave both have a USB. They both like talk right up to main stage without really any muss or fuss. And yeah.
amazing. I love it. By the way, Wednesday, my interview Wednesday coming up, the 12th or whatever that is a guy named Jack Hotop, who is the sound designer for Korg since the early 80s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, what a fucking genius this guy is. Yeah. So he's behind the Korg Poly 800, the DW 8000, the M1, the Triton Extreme, just every Korg that we've used and heard of since the early 80s. Um, and so he's, you know, I'm going to try to squeeze 40 years of history into
Nice.
75 minutes. Um, so, okay, so just continuing on, and then I'll kind of wrap up here. Um, so yeah, we have this beat going. And then I can remember once you got a clock going, it can do all kinds of things. open VCAs. It can, start and stop sequencers and start and stop samples. I'm going to come over to this side of the world a little bit. And again, I've got that other clock divider. And reminding us of our path, here's the original clock. I'm going into a mult, and I'm multiplying that clock. So I can pick up the clock here where it's green, or here, or here where I have something plugged into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. I use that all the time. I often grab this one right here and put it right into this sequencer. Notice it's shorted out for a second there. That's kind of a thing that happens in modular before I plug it in. And that's a weird area that has to do with your power supply and the grounding and all kinds of funny. So you see some funny things happen, but nothing bad ever happens. And notice as soon as I plugged in the clock, that sequencer starts going, right? I'll unplug it. There it is.
Yep.
If I plug it in. What's beautiful about this sequencer, just to segue for a second, just a sidebar. This is, again, this 2 HP thing.
Mm-hmm.
So any sequencer is going to look for time. How fast should I be going? Right?
Right.
You got to tell it. And each beat, each click, 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 click is going to happen at the speed of the clock. So now that's how melodies and stuff sound so great in electronic music, because if they're synced to the clock, then we're good. So any sequencer is going to have a clock in, so you can tell how fast it's going, and out, which is going to spit out the pitch, basically, the notes. It doesn't have to be notes on the other side. It could be any number of things, a filter cut off. It could be really anything. That's, again, the eternal beauty of this stuff and what you have on your Crave. Like I just said there, take the noise and plug that into shit that it's not supposed. It doesn't matter. Something's going to happen.
Yeah, you're right.
It really is like such a revolutionary, because as you know, buying and learning and installing and working with so many pieces of gear over your life, thousands of pieces of gear. You've sat in front of thousands of rack mounts and, units and power supplies and software. And if you think about it, they're all designed and they lock you in. This knob does this. This knob does that. And this switch does that, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's a beautiful thing. But again, the beauty of modular, which you have with your Crave, is they just leave the door open. They just say,
just see what happens.
yeah. And for 8 out of 10 people, it might be something unpleasant that they go, yeah, I can't use that. The beauty is you might use it. You might say, oh my God, that sounds like an exploding 55-gallon drum. I need that sound.
Yeah,
So,
you're
okay.
right.
So coming out of the sequencer, I'm going to go into the pitch of oscillator, one of the many oscillators I have. So now this oscillator, even though we can't hear it, is hearing those notes.
Okay.
The beauty of this little thing too is I can set how many notes are in the sequence. Right now it's 3 notes. If I turn it all the way down, no blinking because it's only staying on 1 note. And if I gently turn it up, you'll see 2 LEDs start blinking. See? And if I turn it up again, you'll see 3. Keep going, and you see where we're going. Now there's 4,
Yep.
5, 6. I'll turn it all the way up. You have all 16. And it's doing 8 and then another 8. Very brilliant design. There's only 9 LEDs. But the first one tells you whether you're in the first bank of 8 or the second bank of 8.
Okay, yep.
So really, really brilliant. I love this company because they sit down and they say, how can we squeeze shit that people need 2 or 3 times the space to do? So it's a little cramped, it's a little weird, but very powerful. So just so we can hear how clocks lets you sync up a melody right away. So I now have this oscillator listening to those notes, whatever they might be. I don't even know. I'm going to calibrate this little to the lower side. This is my pitch right here.
Mhm.
And wherever I calibrate it is where things will kind of be centered. Let's take some audio from that guy. Let's see. Let's use I need like a medium. Here we go. By the way, I have a thing here. Oh, you can't really see it. Oh, and I turn my light around. This is a pretty cool thing. It attaches to a mic stand, and that's where my cables go.
Nice.
That way, you know, they're all available. Otherwise, it would be a big fucking pile, right? Of just. So that's a brilliant little thing. And this is nothing new. They had this in the 40s, right?
Yeah.
For cables. That's what I love is so much of this shit. You see these old pictures of, 1940s radio stations. And you're like, oh, wow, that's... sorry, my light fell off here. Okay, great. So, okay, so let's get some audio from this. We're just going to take a good old sine wave out of here. And let's turn that down. Let's see what it sounds like. Now, I don't know what it's going to sound like, which is half the fun of doing modular sometimes.
Right.
All I know is it's not, these notes are blasting into this oscillator. That's all I know. So let's turn it up, and whatever it sounds like will be a mystery to both of us. But we know this. It's going to be in the perfect time with the drums. Kind of low. Let me put it higher. So there we go. Just a weird little pattern. Let me give it some more notes. And it's perfectly in time. Played. So you can So what's interesting there too is let's pull that out. The sequence is going at the speed of the clock, but if I want to go a little slower, like a quarter of the speed. There we go. That's more of a classic. But what did I do? I just gave the sequencer a much slower version of the clock. You know, it worked at the full speed, but it was a little busy, right?
Yeah.
All I did was come over here and plug it into it's the white cable. I plugged it into divide by 4.
Ah. Okay.
So another tip there, like that's something you can immediately apply, because if you're doing sequences and you have something happening with the Korg and something happening with the main stage, if it's not sitting right, say, you know what? Let me cut the tempo in half, you know, and adjust on either side. Nice little groove there. And the beauty of this little Pittsburgh oscillator, which I really love, a little FM frequency modulation. Let me turn that down all the way. Hit the fine tune by accident. Anyway, what's great about this little module is it's got an FM. So I'm going to now use one of its other outputs to frequency modulate. So when I plug this in, you'll hear a subtle change as soon as I turn up the CV amount. Again, to your point earlier of that you just did something with your LFO where you were able to control the intensity.
Right.
Same thing here. This line of these 4 pots, that's exactly what they do. See,
Okay.
they're all labeled amount.
All right. Yep.
So you're going to plug in under them. You're going to plug in sync. You're going to plug in fragment CV. But it doesn't matter if that's turned to 0. Ain't nothing going to happen. So I love that. It lets you adjust the amount. So listen as I turn up the CV amount. You'll hear it. That's a nice sound, but so much more complex when the oscillator itself is modulating its own self. It's almost like a feedback loop.
Oh, wow, yeah.
In a way, it's the difference between 70s and 80s, or 60s and 70s and 80s. Here's 60s, 70s. Here's 80s.
Yeah, you're right.
Right? And the
Yep.
80s were about FM. You said it before, DX7. Now a DX7, I'm just modulating a sine wave with a pulse wave. True kind of FM synthesis. It's a bunch of sine waves. So it's a sine wave modulating a sine wave, and then another sine wave modulating that. And they call them operators in DX7.
Right.
But usually, I think there's 7 of them in each kind of oscillator, grouping. I forget the word for it. It's not grouping. But John Chowning, actually, I got to meet him at the NobCon. He invented that in the early 70s. He said, wait a minute. If you take one sine wave and modulate it with another sine wave, and we just demonstrated it, you get a completely richer sound. I'll unplug it one more time. So in the early 70s, he came up with that, but then he started stacking that up. He's like, what if you modulate the second one with a third one? And I'm not wired to do that here, but
right.
Okay, so we have a cool little groove going. I'm going to add one more thing and then we're done. This unit here, which is a Karplus strong oscillator called the Mysteron. I've talked about it a little bit.
Yep.
Really fascinating. It takes up to two rhythmic inputs. You can see right now, those are beating at the same speed because I've got one plugged in. I'm going to plug one more in so that it's got a polyrhythm. All right, let's see what we got. Let's divide by 5. So we've got an open slot here. We'll divide by 5. So notice how the LEDs are exactly the same.
Yep.
Once I plug this in, you'll see 2 different beats happening. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
So again, what I love about modular is the better you get with it. I don't know what this is going to sound like, but I do know it's going to happen in rhythm with everything else. So you're halfway there. It's going to be beautiful rhythmically. And I know this modular enough to know that if I dial in a sound here, this is kind of the amplitude. This is the decay. So I'm going to have a real tight, quick little sound. It's going to sound, I don't know, it's going to sound pretty weird and metallic, I think. All right. So now we're going to fade it up in the mixer. So that's cool, and you can obviously mess around with that until you get a nice Put a little reverb on that. And again, once that bass line gets a little boring, I can vary it by varying how many notes. Okay, so there we have it. A pretty, involved little beat. I'll just do two more things to end here. I'm going to go back now and change our clock division to just hear how different the whole groove gets. But it still stays in time. Gets a little too busy there, but and let's see. So again, like I did with the bass line where it was too busy, I'm finding this thing's a little too busy. This whole clock divider, again, the white cable, it's based on the main clock beat, the green.
Right.
I'm going to switch that around. I'm going to now say, well, how about if I split it over here with this cable and change the whole master tempo on this side. So I'm going to unplug this. You'll hear the metallic sound stop for a minute. Here we go. But if I now get a different... What a subtle difference, right?
Yeah.
So now that metallic sound, it's a lot more musical. Because again, I just dialed it back a little bit. It's not happening on every single beat, but kind of 1/3 of the beats. And now it's really funky. I mean, this thing now is doing really cool. So, and you notice this is the decay. As I change this, that metallic sound gets really wild. Yeah. Then I dial it back. Again, like everything in modular, I can do that with an LFO. So let's pop in an LFO. Now it's varying the sound for me. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really nice.
And then finally, the master clock. I'm going to turn it all the way down and up and hear how everything obeys it. It's at 0. So stuff's going to take forever to change. I think all the way left, this clock is like every couple minutes or something. So you know, but I'll turn it up slowly. Look how slow the sequence is changing. But that's so cool. In a soundtrack or something. And then as I go up, tempo goes up. And there we have it.
Wow. That is
Madness.
really, really a great walkthrough how you set that up. That's real. I'm glad you recorded it so I can
Yeah,
go
right.
back
Yeah,
and
I
oh,
forgot
how
till
did
halfway
well,
through. Yeah, man.
well, that was great. I love all that, all the sound. That was really nice. I really appreciated that for sure. Thank you.
Likewise, bro. I mean, it's I say it every time because it's so true and it's so um you know I'd be hanging out on a Saturday night, messing around with stuff anyway, or
Yeah.
maybe not, maybe wasting time on a YouTube deep dive on some bullshit.
Yeah.
So this is so much better that there's a great reason to hang with friends and you know, and just talk about this stuff and learn from each other. And I get just as much from it. Because I have to kind of scratch my chin and go, wait a minute, how does that work? You know, and
Yeah.
and I take a half hour before I do these things and kind of go, all right, what are we doing tonight? Or
Hmm.
I'm thinking about it during the day, or even last night I said, tomorrow's going to be drums and samplers. And I didn't even touch samplers. I mean, at the end there, you were hearing a sample,
Hmm.
but uh, it's yeah, my hope and wish, and I think it's happening, is to see you find ways to use this in your stuff. And I
Yeah, well, I definitely have been doing that so far because, without you, I would, well, first of all, without you, I never would even realize you could make sound effects with synthesizers. That wouldn't even have dawned on me. So
right,
you said, oh, the Coke commercial. Oh, okay. So
it's
right there, I
fantastic.
was like, okay. And then all the other stuff I've learned from you, the LFO, even today, the LFO controlling, the pitch and the envelope generator, doing some stuff that I wanted it to do for the all that kind of stuff. It was like,
Yeah,
oh man, it's really it's really cool that I was able to figure that out. And I'm learning how what the Korg does too on a basic, and I'm the kind of person I like to start with the basics, even
yeah,
the simple things like radar, pings, and, alarms.
yeah,
It's a great way to go, oh, this is why, okay, this is how you can do that. And then once you know that, then you can create other things and,
yeah.
go
No,
from
it's
there. But
it's it's really remarkable. And that I'm still learning about that last one, that carpless strong
yeah.
oscillator, and you've heard me say that. And that's two guys, the two mathematicians
Hmm.
who came with this. And I've recently learned, because I keep trying to understand it. And I've recently learned that what it's based on is a really tiny, tiny sample of a reverb sound. And it makes
Okay.
sense because when you've got a tiny kind of a slap back, as we saw with the reverb, you get a metallic thing happening.
Hmm.
The
Yep.
sound is repeating itself, but in 5 milliseconds,
Hmm.
7, 10, you get somewhere in that range. You get these different. So these guys, so that's how carpal strung works. I'm still understanding it, but it works by starting out with a tiny, tiny bite of sound that's kind of a reverb, digital delay, repeat, but then letting you sculpt that. And then, so that's when you get those metallic sounding,
Okay.
ring
Yeah. Yeah.
modulated type things. So I think I'm on the just stuck my toe in the water on carpless strong. I don't understand it. I love it because you get those bells and cymbals and all
Yeah.
that. Um, and it also lets you imitate strings. That's the other thing. Carpless strong lets you um, lets you imitate strings, like a plucked
Oh yeah.
string
Yeah.
is kind
Yep.
of the specialty of carpless strong. So so something like that. You know, what the hell is that? Some alien? I don't know what it is, but certainly it sounds like broken metal.
Hmm.
Jesus, all the way to like garbage cans. And that's just keeping short, short, short. release, done, done. But if you crank it up, now it's a weird string.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
all of this stuff really, I'm sure. I mean, you do this anyway because of your career. You listen to things. You hear doors slamming, and oh, what's
Hmm.
that sound? You're running in a stairwell, and the reverb is crazy, and you kind of go, oh, okay, that's because okay, I'm in this stone room. Yeah, I'm in a
Hmm.
reverb chamber. Okay, so I love units like this that really expand that for you and have you go, okay, so this same sound, that sound is a string. Yeah, if it's long enough.
Hmm.
So all I'm going to do is change the release. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
My mind's blown every day. That's what's great.
Yeah.
This
There's
is,
great. Yeah. There's just so much. There's so much out there. It's like you can't even. I can't even comprehend the amount of things that are synth software based, hardware based, all this stuff. Now there's some things that are kind of like a hybrid. It's a hardware, but
right.
it's also software. It's
Hmm.
like, all right, let me figure out what I have. Let me
Right.
let me learn how what I have to work, and then I'll move on from there. But it's endless.
Yeah.
You know.
It's, it's so therapeutic too because you're getting an end result out of it. You're actually using it in your work. So that I love that. Yeah, it's so cool. All
Yeah.
right, bro. I'm gonna jump.